Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, stay with us as the Suns get set to shine.
Here's Perry to Gar Hurd. Here's the jump shot.
Comes to Marley, a long three. He got it! He got it! Into Booker. Here's the three. Suzanne! Oliver, Sir Charles, and he flies in for a wham, bam, slam. Whammo time! He got it! Suzanne! Oh, brother!
Welcome to the 7 Seconds or Less podcast. This is a podcast about both the NBA generally and the Phoenix Suns specifically. My name is Max McCauley. I am one of your hosts, your other host. His name is David Nash, and he joins me right now. David, I think there are 4 days until the draft, if I have that right. How are you feeling right now?
I'm feeling a little nervous, Max. You know, pretty set on who we're taking at the top, which we'll get into pretty soon, but you know, there's a lot of things that can happen in the next 4 days and a lot of things that can happen on draft night. So I'm anxious.
Yeah, I don't think it's an exaggeration to say the next 4 days are some of the 4 biggest in the history of the franchise. Do you think that's fair?
I think that's pretty fair. I think everyone's, you know, ready to turn this thing around, and it starts at the top of this draft.
It really does. That's going to matter the most. But there's going to be a lot of other things that matter too, and we're going to get into all of it today because today we're doing a draft predictions podcast. We're helped by a bunch of questions that you guys all submitted. Thank you so much for that. We have like a dozen questions here. They're all great. Looking forward to getting into it.
I can't wait. I love to make a prediction, and yeah, it's been good to get some listener questions in for this one.
It has been. Thank you, everybody who submitted questions. Before we get into that, though, we're going to do the segment we do every week. David's going to regale us with a story of Suns past in his Did You Know section.
Thanks, Max. So right now the Suns have picks 1, 16, 31, and 59, as we know. But did you know, Max, Phoenix have never drafted 4 guys before that have ended up making the roster for that season?
I didn't know that. It doesn't really surprise me, though. It's hard to do.
It is. So since the inception of the 2-round draft, the Suns have had 4 picks on 5 different occasions: 89, 90, 94, 14, and 2016. They got close a couple of times, but there was some, you know, players swapped or stashed away in Europe, and therefore the streak's still alive. Some of the guys that were drafted in those classes were, you know, that the listeners might want to look up are Cedric Ceballos, Wesley Person, Greg Grant, and Antonio Lang. So, you know, not too many household names there.
Not a ton of hits.
But if we take it back 1 year before that, so 1988, when there was still multiple rounds of the draft, the Suns actually had 6 picks across 3 rounds, and 4 guys did make the roster in that year. They were Tim Perry at number 7,
Okay.
Dan Marley at 14.
That's a hit.
That is a hit. Andrew Lang at 28. But Max, can you guess the 4th who was drafted at pick 50 overall that year?
Ooh, no, but I hope this isn't going to make me feel like an idiot for never caring about pick 59.
I'll give you some clues. They've been in the news recently, and they have a more recent history with the Suns as well.
Been in the news recently. I don't know. What was it?
It's none other than Steve Douglas Kerr.
Okay, all right.
He was born in Lebanon, of all places, which I didn't know before looking into this. And he was a 6'3" guard, 175 pounds. And the reason I've actually put him in here is he went to none other than the University of Arizona.
Is there anybody relevant to this draft who went there?
I think there might be a guy at the top. So we'll get to that later, but Steve debuted in the NBA in December 17, 1988, and ultimately only played 26 games for the Suns. He averaged 6 minutes and 2.1 points. He was traded to the Cavs and ended up being traded 5 times in his career. He won 5 titles as a player, 3 with the Bulls and 2 with the Spurs, and now he's obviously got his 3rd as a coach with the Warriors, which is pretty impressive. Got one more question for you, Max, before we round this out quickly for this episode. He made $100,000 in that first season with the Suns, but what do you think his career earnings over 14 seasons in the NBA were?
Steve Kerr's career earnings, $5 million.
Little more, but still pretty surprising. He made $15.7 million over 14 years in the NBA, so a little over $1 million a season.
It's worth remembering that everyone before like this modern era kind of got gypped compared to what these guys get now.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at MJ's, earnings as a player, they're pretty small compared to what the guys are getting now.
Until like the end, right? When he started getting $30 million a year in 1-year contracts?
Yes, exactly.
That's probably a little closer to what he was worth, to be honest.
And some.
Okay, let's go ahead and get into the questions. Actually, no, we're going to start with predicting the number 1 pick, right?
We are. We're gonna mix it up here. There's gonna be some predictions for the draft that we've slotted in there, and then we'll answer some listener questions along the way.
All right, we're all in suspense, David. Who do you think they're going to take number 1?
I think they're taking DeAndre Ayton, and he's the consensus pick among most of us, and one that I'm pretty excited about. I think there's maybe a 10% chance that it's not Ayton, and I think that's really only if they trade the pick, rather than just taking someone outright at number 1 that's not Ayton. What do you think?
I think 10% is about right. Maybe I might go up as far as 15 just because McDee's so willing to move. Also because we have the recent precedent of it happening last year. Mm-hmm. But yeah, like you said, I mean, for all intents and purposes, I think they're going to take DeAndre Ayton. It's really hard to see them not doing it after the media circus they put on and the players hanging out with them and just everything that's happened between the lottery and now.
Yep, I think we can move on pretty quickly from the number 1 pick.
Cool, let's do it. So we're going to do our first listener question here, and unfortunately our first one is somebody's name I can't pronounce at all because it seems unpronounceable to me, but it's DJSJFKSJS at Belhakek. You'll have to let me know on Twitter how to pronounce that. He asked me, how do we get Luka Doncic at number 4 overall without giving up the 2021 Miami pick? It'd be tough. I think the first way you do it is by including Josh Jackson in the deal, right?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty fair assessment.
The problem, though, is I don't know if Memphis would even be interested in getting Josh Jackson because Memphis is really on record. Their owner, Robert Perro, said they want to win 50 games next year. They want to be good right now. So I think if they're trading that pick, it's not going to be for someone like Josh, who, while promising, is probably not going to help you be a 50-win team next year.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say more likely it would be a 3-way trade where they're getting like a current star and maybe TJ would help them win, and we're giving them a bunch of draft picks also so they can have more of a future built up. That's probably the way to do it. So it would be future picks, but not 21 Miami. It'd probably be like one of our protected firsts, something like that. What do you think?
Yeah, I think, if you're not including the Miami pick, you're pretty much emptying the treasure chest of everything else. And as you said, probably including Josh Jackson as well.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. And we'll get into that 2021 Miami pick a little later and how valuable it actually is.
Yeah.
All right, you want to go next?
Yeah, I'm gonna move on to Alex Carsey at Alexander Carsey, if anyone wants to follow him on Twitter. He's asked if the draft goes number 1 Ayton, number 2 Bagley, number 3 Doncic, and the Grizz have 4 and Chandler on the board for 16 and TJ. Do you take it, and who do you select? Interesting question. Before I answer it, I'm also going to throw in Stephen Freeman's question here, who's at SteviePF22, who asks if the Suns get in a big bidding war with the Celtics for the 4th pick, who wins and what's the package and who's the pick. So a couple of questions there about the 4th pick as well. To answer Alex's question first, I think the simple answer is no, and that's because the Suns have taken Ayton and there's not really someone left there for them to do that deal. I definitely want Doncic, and Alex has clearly said Doncic is there at 3. So I do think that's a trade worth looking at, and something that might come up with reports of Memphis attaching Chandler Parsons to pick 4. But to answer Alex's question, my answer there would be no. To move on to Stevens.
Well, real quick, let me interject on that one. So I agree with you. The trading for number 4 is much less attractive if we take Ayton and Doncic off the board, because you know, a lot of the value in this draft is bigs, and if we already get a big, that value kind of goes away a little bit. But I will say that for just the trade he proposed, which is Ford and Chandler Parsons for 16 and TJ, I mean, I do that anyway just because we're not giving up very much, and we can just get the value of taking anybody there, you know, and maybe trading them down the line or whatever. That's just not a very risky thing to do.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point, and definitely a trade I would do straight away with Doncic on the board. But you make a good point. Maybe it's something that you just do anyway, and kind of work it out after that.
Yeah, you don't do the Godfather package for that, but you do that 16 and TJ, I think, and that'll lead into your next question, which is if you get in a bidding war with the Celtics.
Yeah, so I mean, any bidding war with the Celtics, I think you lose out if they really want to beat you. We'll touch on it later with kind of the value of our different assets compared to maybe Boston's, but you know, I think you're going to lose out to the Celtics in any war that they really want to get the player that you're after. Having said that, you know, I would imagine that the Suns would win something around 4 purely because it sounds like Memphis want to attach Chandler Parsons to that. So if the Celtics can't find somebody else to take on Parsons, I don't think they're in a position to, you know, eat a contract like that with where they're going with their franchise. So, you know, I would just give a little caveat there that, you know, the Suns could win out against the Celtics in particular with a Memphis trade around 4 purely because they're willing to take on Chandler Parsons when maybe the Celtics aren't.
Yeah, it's worth noting that I don't even know if the Celtics have the contracts to do that. They would have to put... Because they have really high-value contracts like Horford and Kyrie and Hayward.
Yeah.
And they also have like really cheap guys, but they don't really have any of those mid-tier guys.
That's true. That's very true.
But I will say asset-wise, I mean, there's no richer team in the entire league. I think they have a possibility of having like 4 first-round picks next year or something like that. It's crazy. They have so much.
Yeah. And as we've touched on a couple of times already, we'll get into just the value of those two kind of sets of assets a little later.
Cool. Sounds good to me. I think you're going to move into your like lottery prediction, right? And I'm going to comment on it.
Yeah, I'm going to run through this real quick. I kind of just want to get this on the record and see if there's, if I can hit on a few of them on come draft night. You know, things might change in the next few days with reports and things, but you know, as of right now, we've already picked Ayton at the top. I've actually got Bagley at number 2 to Sacramento, and the main reason for that is that he's actually the only guy as of right now that the Kings have worked out. There's obviously some rumors around Porter and you know, Porter's camp trying to steer him away from the Kings, and there's obviously Doncic as well, which, you know, no team has worked out. But you know, I'm kind of looking at the Fox draft for the Kings. He was kind of one of the only guys that would come in there, and they kind of fell in love with that aspect. And that's why I'm slotting Bagley in at 2 to the Kings.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense based on the fact they only worked him out. And I would also say that the other guy that kind of portends to is Doncic, right? Because there was photos of him online and they can't work him out. So if they only worked out one American guy, maybe it's because they're just not that interested in the American guys.
That's true. So we'll go to pick 3, and someone we've kind of slotted in this position all the way through since starting this podcast. I've got Jaren Jackson Jr. out of Michigan State at 3 to Atlanta. I think he's the perfect fit, as we've discussed, and he's also worked out for the team, which is important.
Atlanta's tough. Yeah, because Atlanta's roster is so wide open that it's kind of hard to predict. But I think it'll be Doncic or JJJ for sure, or maybe Bagley if he's still there. But you have him going off, so. Yeah,
I've got him gone. So we'll move to 4. I've got Luka Doncic at 4 to Memphis. I will note, and you know, you'll get into yours a little later, but yeah, I'm running through the picks as if they're taken. I'm not kind of factoring in any trades or anything like that. So I think if Memphis keeps the pick, and Doncic is on the board at 4 there, I think he may be the pick. It's kind of worth noting actually that Carter's the only guy that Memphis has publicly brought in for a workout. So I think, you know, that kind of leans even more that Doncic really makes sense at that pick.
Yeah, or that they're trading the pick, which you're not going to get into, but that would also predict that, right?
Exactly. Another kind of perfect fit guy is Mo Bamba at 5 to Dallas, so I'm going to kind of skip over that pretty quickly. Move to Orlando at 6, which I've got Trae Young, which I'm not 100% convinced, just with the history of Orlando and Hammond and, not really being a guy that, Hammond would be attracted to in the past. But I think he's kind of, he's the highest guy on my board left and the highest guy that has worked out for the Magic. So I'm going to slot him in there at 6.
We've mentioned this before, but that franchise desperately needs something to get excited about, and I think that might trump any concerns about, he's not one of their favorite long guys.
Yeah, exactly. Moving on to Carter now, who I mentioned before. I've got him at 7 for Chicago. It just feels like a Chicago pick to me, and he did work out for the team. So, maybe that's me, really valuing Carter and not, seeing him want to slip past 7. But
I love his fit with Lowry Markkanen too. That'd be really nice.
Yeah, I think that's really nice. So I'm pretty happy and confident to go with that one. Which moves us on to the swing pick here with Cleveland at 8. I'm just going to go straight up with Michael Porter Jr. purely because I think it's an 8-person top tier draft, so to speak. So I think Cleveland, if they keep the pick and don't make a move, they're just going to take the best upside talent on the board. He's only had his pro days, obviously, so there's not a lot to look at there in terms of who he's worked out for and who he hasn't. But yeah, I think, as I said, highest upside there for Cleveland if they stay at number 8. And
that would be such a risky pick. It could pay off great. You could start your whole new era without LeBron on a star like him. But also, if you whiff on that and he never plays a game in the NBA, we've talked about this before. They're so asset deprived. Man, that's tough.
Yeah, swing for the fences kind of pick there, I think. Moving to the Knicks at 9. I think the highest guy on my board, at least, that they've worked out is Mikal Bridges, and I think there's a lot of links there that make sense. So I've got him slotted in at the moment at number 9. I
think that's better than when they might actually do. The rumors are they're interested in Kevin Knox and Lonnie Walker, so I'd much rather them take Mikal than those guys.
Yeah, and a kind of nice segue there into Philly at 10. I've got an interesting, what I would consider an interesting pick here, and it's really just it's kind of Intel based, not my own Intel obviously, but some of those other Intel mocks that are out there. I've got Knox at 10 to Philly, which I think is an interesting fit for their team. And I've noted here in my notes something that you just touched on, that maybe the New York Knicks take him first, but people seem convinced that he's a top 10 pick in this draft just on kind of how things are shaking up in the lead up before Thursday. So
I will say I like him a lot better in Philly than in New York in terms of his own career projection. I think it'd be a lot better for him.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting fit. You can probably come off the bench to start with, but there's some interesting lineups that they can play there with. Obviously when you've got Ben Simmons running the point, you can do some funky things. So I'm pretty happy with him at 10. I've got Charlotte picking at 11, and something we've spoken about before, but I could really see them picking Colin Sexton here. I think he's an MJ style pick.
More on that later.
And they're probably going to need a point guard as well if they choose to trade Kemba. So and he did work out for the team, which I'm sure people are seeing a bit of a trend here. I like to kind of look at that stuff when I'm trying to mock picks out. So
we don't really have a whole lot else to go on, so it makes sense.
Exactly. Now we've got the back-to-back Clippers picks, so I'll kind of do them at the same time. I've got Miles Bridges and Robert Williams for them, both guys that came in and worked out for the Clippers, and kind of the highest value guys left on the board by that stage, I think. Obviously, there's chances that they do some weird things of their own with those picks in trade-ups and certain scenarios like that, but if they're just going to commit to taking two guys, a 6'6" guy, I should say, and a 6'9" guy. Bit of versatility there.
A random thought I had yesterday: what if both Bridges are there and they just take both of them and just confuse everyone for life by having both Bridges?
I don't mind that, particularly with our running Bridges as a joke. It would be pretty cool if they were on the same team together.
It would be fun.
So that takes us to 14, to the end of the lottery with Denver. And I've got my highest ranked guy left. Also a guy who I think is a pretty good fit in Denver and someone that worked out for the team, and that's Zaire Smith out of Texas Tech.
Yeah, that's a fun fit. I like to see Jokic throwing that guy passes.
Yeah, I think he brings them something a little different, and I think he would slot in pretty well with the Nuggets there. So yeah, there's our lottery, Max.
I like it. It's sensible. It makes a lot of sense. Who would you say is the best player? So is SGA your best player who didn't make it in the top 14 there?
I've actually got Troy Brown at 15 to Washington, just to throw that in there. So that might be me. We'll lead into pick 16 here in a minute, but that might be me being a little bit hopeful. But
you're rigging it so you get your guy at 16, huh?
Yeah, Brown's he is in that spot on my big board, so I haven't rigged it too much there.
Yeah, and also I don't think Washington's going to be taking SGA. Although I don't know, maybe.
You never know.
You definitely never know, especially with Washington.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on. So we're kind of getting into the talk on 16 now.
Yep.
DQ at the Danamaji, I think is maybe how you pronounce that. He asks about our thoughts on Dante DiFincenzo. Jeffrey Savage also asked. Jeffrey Savage is at Afflicted Med. They both kind of want to know how we view Dante.
Yep.
Jeffrey Savage specifically asks, he doesn't really see the fit except as a bench scorer. I kind of agree with that. For some reason, I think a lot of people seem to think that Dante DiVincenzo was like a wing. I think it's because he's kind of tall, but he has a kind of a short wingspan. It's only 6'6". He's only 6'4.5" in shoes. He's really more of a combo guard, size-wise. And I think he's really good. I really like him. I think that he's worthy of a pick in that range. I'm not a huge fan of him at 16 for the Suns in particular, just because he doesn't bring a lot of the things I want out of a 16 pick, primarily defense and passing. I think Dante's an okay passer, but it's not to the level where I'm kind of getting over his size deficiencies. Yeah,
I think that's fair.
Cool. You want to go on?
Yeah, so we've got a question here from Alessandro Cozzi, at ALE-Cos1. And I'm kind of going to combine this with predicting the 16th pick, which we've already alluded to. So we've already spoiled that. But he's asked us to create a list of guys that we could see the Suns trading up for or taking at 16 and put them into the following categories. So 1 being best day of my life, 2 being let's go, 3 being happy with the outcome, 4 just okay, 5 meh, let's see, and 6 WTF no. So I've got 6 guys here. Obviously, we talked about SGA, so I'm not going to look too much at trading up here, although I think the first couple of guys in this list, you could, maybe trade up a few spots to make sure that you get. So, my best day of my life pick would be SGA at 16 if he's there. I think it's just a incredible long-term fit for the Suns if he works out. Great fit with Booker. Could essentially have him coming off the bench to start with, but you'd be looking that he'd be the starting point guard going forward, and really.
So you're thinking more like not you're not thinking like major trade ups here. You're kind of limiting this to like within reason trade ups.
Yeah, I mean, I would hope that he's there at 16. I think there is a chance of that. The fact that he hasn't worked out for any team makes me think he's got some sort of a guarantee or promise a little earlier, but and that's probably unlikely to be from the Suns, but. You never know with these things. I would probably say, these first 2 guys are, maybe someone that you trade up to 11 or so for. But yeah, I'm not looking at any major trade ups any further than that with this.
Okay, I wanted to clarify that because my answer to that would probably Trae Young for best day of my life. But you're not even considering that kind of a trade.
Nah, I haven't. I've gone very sensible here, Max.
That's fair. You're trying to be more sensible than I am.
My let's go guy would be Zaire Smith. I'd be very happy with that pick at 16. So pretty comfortable putting him in there.
Yeah, can I jump in just real quick? Me too. I would be really happy with Zaire Smith. I would be happier with him though if we got Doncic instead of Ayton, which is not going to happen obviously, just because I think we need a little more playmaking out of our guardish, wingish positions, and I don't know if he's going to bring that.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. My happy with the outcome is someone that I've touched on quite a bit in previous pods. It would be Kyrie Thomas. Why he's not one of those first 2 spots is I think 16, as I've noted, is maybe a little bit of a reach for Thomas. So it's I would just be happy with the pick and probably happy that it's not a few other guys that are coming after this. So I'll move on to 4, which is just it's okay, as Alessandro has put it. And for me, that's a guy that you just spoke about, DiVincenzo. I'd just be okay with that pick. I wouldn't be ecstatic, but I also wouldn't hate it as much as I would hate this next guy, which is my meh, let's just wait and see. So that would be Aaron Holiday for me.
Ooh, that's not WTF no, huh?
No, I haven't gone that far for him. I think, I like Holiday, which is why, I wouldn't go absolutely crazy. It would obviously be the Suns have just really zeroed in on him and wanted to make sure that they get him and, are using pick 16 to do that. So, yeah, I'd be willing to let's see on that and kind of let him prove me wrong.
Okay.
My W2F no, which I think is a very, very small chance of happening, but you never know. I'm going to put Diallo there at 16.
Oh, God.
If that was a pick for the Suns, I would, that would ruin my draft. So
Wow. You picked a good one. I didn't even consider that as a possibility, but I could see like a 1% chance of that happening, and it would be awful.
Which is, that's kind of the reaction we're looking for here, I think, with that
totally,
category.
yeah.
So
that's a good answer.
I've thrown him in there. So yeah, there's my prediction for the 16th pick, and then a few other guys there answering Alessandro's question.
That's so, man. I'm like still stunned by that. That's a good one, Diallo. Oh God, jeez.
I'm not even sure I'd be overly happy with him at 31, to be honest. So
I wouldn't. No, I would be mad at 31. I didn't even consider the possibility it could be 16. That would be awful. That guy just can't. He doesn't know how to play basketball. Don't draft basketball players who don't play basketball.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So we're gonna keep with the theme of the 16 pick here. I've got a trade idea for you, David.
Yep.
I've been on record saying that I think if Kemba becomes available, the Suns are the front runners to get Kemba, especially if we take Ayton.
Yeah, I think we'd definitely be in the top tier of groups, chasing.
So do I. And I think that given our draft position and given kind of we talked about, Charlotte's going to be really hot for Colin Sexton, I think, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, I've mocked him there, so I've played my hand there for sure.
Cleveland has been very publicly working out and sort of gushing over without gushing over too far Colin Sexton and the lead up. Have you seen any of that?
Yeah, I've seen bits and pieces. Interesting. Definitely interesting.
I think there's a chance that Cleveland's not so hot on him themselves. They're just trying to say, hey, Charlotte, you want Colin Sexton?
Bit of mind games there, you think?
I think they might be saying, hey, you might have to come up to number 8 if you want Colin Sexton on your team next year.
Well, Kobe Altman's, he's definitely done some interesting things in his short GM career.
He ain't afraid to make trades. So
Yep.
I've got a 3-way trade for you, and it involves Charlotte trying to get up and move up to 8 for Colin Sexton. Here's what it looks like. Phoenix, Charlotte, and Denver. Denver, as we all know, is trying to get rid of Kenneth Faried.
Mm-hmm.
So they send Faried to Charlotte in a salary dump with number 14.
Yep.
They get Alan Williams. This is a 3-way trade with Phoenix as well. They get Alan Williams in the trade. They end up just getting totally out of Faried's contract. That they can cut Williams. That's zero. That's zero on the cap. They're just out of it for number 14.
Yep.
We send Charlotte 16, 31, TJ Warren, and Jared Dudley. So they don't take on any long-term money besides TJ, who they might view as as useful. And then they also get our number 16 pick and 31. They package all those picks together with their 11 to go up to 8 to get Colin Sexton.
I think it's interesting. It would definitely be worth looking at for all teams involved. You've thought about it from that respect, and
I haven't even given you Phoenix yet.
Well, I think I know where it's going, but yeah,
It could be Dwight Howard.
please no.
It's not Dwight Howard. So yeah, Phoenix gets Kimba. They get Marvin Williams, who I think actually could help them. His contract's another couple of years, but he can actually help them at power forward.
Yeah, I really like Marvin Williams as a throw-in piece with Kemba, and I think it's a contract that they'll maybe look to get off if they do kind of make this type of a move.
Yep. And they also, just to make the salary work, they get Hernan Gomez, or we get Hernan Gomez. Which Hernan Gomez, I think he could be a useful backup center, maybe.
Yeah, I was high on him in that draft, so I'm not going to turn him away.
The reason why I like this trade is because I think that in a vacuum, Charlotte and Phoenix trading, Charlotte I think would want more than this for Kimba. Even if we don't think he's worth it, I think that they've been very, very on the record saying, no, we want an all-star player, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But if we're in the draft and Charlotte really, really wants Colin Sexton, that's the kind of scenario where teams will be less adamant about getting whatever they perceive as the value for somebody. If they just, we just want to go up and get this guy. We don't care. You can help us do that right now.
Yeah.
Would you do that, by the way? Would you give up, basically, it's TJ and 16 and 31, and I guess Sauce's contract, which is kind of valuable, to get Kemba?
Yeah, I think I would. I think that's the type of trade the Suns, will maybe be looking to do on draft night. It's kind of, it's getting off TJ, and it's, packaging a couple of those picks, and it kind of reduces the the strain from, what might be taking guys at 116 and 31 and trying to juggle those, roster numbers.
Yeah, as we said, we think that it's very unlikely they're going to make all those picks just because of what you said. So I think something like this might happen.
Yeah, it's a good one.
All right, so moving on. This is sort of a natural transition to our next listener question. This comes from Carlos Petri, at CPetriNBA, my buddy Carlos. He asks, over/under 1.5 draft day trades for the Suns. Very interesting. So I think they're going to do one. If I had to say, if this question was the whole offseason, I would say over, because I think they'll do more than one trade this whole offseason. But
definitely.
Yeah, definitely on the whole offseason. But just draft day, I think it'll be one, so I'm going to go with the under.
Okay, I think that's smart. But just to be different, I'll go the over.
Okay.
I think there'll definitely be one trade around either 16 or 31, or both of them, like in the trade you just mentioned. But I think there's a pretty good chance that 59's traded as well. I know it's pretty low level and probably won't mean much, but in the interest of answering this question and hopefully getting it correct, I'll go the over.
Do you think that's traded just for like money or what?
Yeah, I think it could be traded for, someone might come looking. You might get a future second. There might be, I don't have the futures list in front of me right now, but there might be a draft coming up where we're don't have a second or a little low on second. So, maybe McDonough will let someone who's chasing a player at the end of the draft, take 59 for a future second or something like that. Couple that in with, the 10% possibility of trading the first pick. I'm willing to kind of, bundle all those odds together and then bank on the over.
God, could you imagine if Woj bombs? Phoenix is trading the number one pick to X. Oh, man.
I can't wait for draft night.
Oh, it's going to be so fun. Especially now with this Kawhi news. It's just, oh, man.
Yeah. So we'll move on. We'll go to Gervais' question. So he's at Warden of D West, which I'm very intrigued about that.
I've never noticed his handle before. That's interesting. Yeah,
that handle. We'll have to ask him, or hopefully he's listening to this and he can let us know on Twitter the origins of that. So he's asked, how valuable do you see the 2021 Miami pick, and what player in that class could the Suns draft, or what stars do you see it being traded for now or later? I'm not going to touch on the second part of that question too much, although I will note something that you noted on another pod that we did the other day, Max, that the 2021 class is looking very interesting if they change the rules around eligibility, and we could have essentially two classes together. I'm not going to pretend to be that much of a draft nerd that I know some names from that class right now, so I can't really give a selection or someone to keep an eye on there.
We're so far out that you can't even... The top 10 in that class is going to be totally different now than it is like leading to the draft. So
exactly, but we will note that it's it's going to be an interesting class, particularly if these rules go ahead. So that helps its how valuable it is. And I also think that it's in the conversation for essentially any star that comes up now or in the future, and that includes Kawhi and anyone else that Ryan McDonough continually touches on any chance that he gets, that he is eventually hoping to trade for a star with these assets that he's building up. So I won't mention any specific names, but I think you can throw it in for any star, and the reason for that is to answer the initial question about how valuable it is. I have it as the second most valuable future asset in the league. So and easily the best asset that Phoenix has from a draft pick standpoint, obviously. I think Nate Duncan and Daniel LaRue usually do a pod at some point ranking all the future assets that teams hold. I'm not sure the last time they've done that. I haven't heard one recently. I think it was
like kind of the beginning of the season.
Okay. So yeah, I would place the Miami pick as the second best, which is behind Boston, as we discussed before. So Boston has the Sacramento Philly swap pick next year, which is only protected one for both of those teams. So essentially it's probably going to be whatever Sacramento's first round pick next year is. as long as it doesn't fall at the 1 in the lottery. And then I would put our Miami pick behind that. Third, then it's arguably between a Boston and a Suns pick again, I would think. Boston has Memphis's pick next year, protected 1 to 8. And the Suns have that Milwaukee pick, which obviously has some tricky protections in it, which I think is designed by McD to keep pushing it back a while until it's maybe hopefully unprotected again, like this Miami pick. So
yeah, I think the idea with that was to just maintain flexibility with it. Like if it would have been totally for sure coming over this year, they'd have to use it in this draft or trade it. Now he kind of has some options with it. Exactly.
So that's kind of one reason I'm in the minority, I think, in not wanting to throw all these picks together, in some massive deal, unless that massive deal's really, really good, because, they're very valuable picks going forward for roster building. These are the kind of picks that when you're starting to build a contender and, you're in those positions that some of those top teams are in the playoffs and they've kind of got no flexibility or no future picks to throw around to, attract that one last desperate piece that they need. That's when, picks like this really come in handy. So I'd be holding on to those unless you get that Godfather type offer.
Yeah, when you talk about like maybe someday Porzingis or Karl Anthony Towns or Giannis Antetokounmpo get sort of restless with their current situations, that how you get one of those guys is if that 2021 Miami pick becomes as valuable as we think it might be. Like if Miami's cap situation ends up leading them to the bottom of the league-ish, that's how you get one of those guys.
Exactly, and that's why I wouldn't just kind of throw it in as the last piece in a trade up this year, for instance.
It's got to be going to number 4 or something. It's got to be a big trade if you're going to use that.
Exactly.
Cool. I think our next one is we're going to predict a one-player team match with pick 17 through 30.
Yeah, so we went through the lottery and then I did mention Washington and Phoenix's picks as well. So, we won't go through the whole rest of the first round. I thought, it might just be interesting to pick, 2 teams here and try and see if we can snag who they're going to draft on Thursday. So I'll let you kick it off.
So this is going to be the most obvious pick ever, but, the Utah Jazz need to draft Kevin Huerter, right?
It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, just not only on fit in their team, which is good because they could use like a wing shooter like that, but also just fit with their culture, I guess is a nice way I'll put it.
Yep.
In fact, I think the rumors that he has a promise, I think there's a chance that's who it is.
Very true. Very true. I think you might even be onto something there with maybe them being one of the last workouts that he did before he made his decision to then stay in the draft. So yeah, you might have nailed that one.
Cool. What do you got?
I'm going to go a little further. I'm actually going to go to the Golden State Warriors pick. I've looked at them just purely because of, the mode they're in. It can be a little easier to kind of look at who they might take because they need very specific pieces that, will hopefully contribute next year as the crunch gets a little harder. So I'm going to go Josh Okogie, I think is how I pronounce it. I don't know if it's got another pronunciation. I think he's, really interesting. They've... already noted this offseason that they'll go in with less centers than they did this season. And I think, wing help, defense help is something that they could, always add to, particularly as, guys like Iggy and that get older. He's got probably a question mark on his shot is probably why he's this far back in the first round. But, there's enough there to work with. To kind of plug in and play some spot minutes, maybe even next year for the team. So yeah, I'm gonna throw that Hail Mary and see if I can land that one.
This is a nice draft for them to be picking to get a guy in that range because I think that's
it really is.
Stacked. And also something that terrified me. I was thinking about this the other day. What if like Mitchell Robinson, because of the mystery around him, just fell to Golden State at 30 and just became like a superstar center?
It's kind of another Jordan Bell type story there, isn't it?
It could be like that, except for I think Mitchell Robinson's got even more a lot more upside than Jordan Bell does. Jordan Bell's probably gonna be a better player. Jordan Bell's really smart. I like him a lot, but Mitchell Robinson's got kind of like there's a chance that if Mitchell Robinson would have gone to college this year, he would have been one of these elite bigs we're talking about at the top.
Yeah, I think you're right. And an interesting thing there with this pick at 29, say versus the pick they had with Jordan Bell last year is. they've kind of stuffed up with Jordan Bell now with their cap crunch. He's, I would say all but set to leave after I think it's this next season because of the way that second round picks contracts work, where if they can really nail this pick at 29, they've got control of a guy for at least 4 years. So, if a guy like that fell to them, they would be running to the podium, as you like to say, Max.
Yeah, let's pray that doesn't happen. Okay, we're going to move on to the next listener question. This is from Benjamin R. Warner at WarnerBen. I think he just flipped his name around for that handle.
Looks like it.
He asks, if Booker, Jackson, Ayton, and Bender are 4 of our 5 of our starting lineup going forward, who can realistically be the 5th guy on a good Suns team in 2 to 3 years? Can it be a rookie, or is there a player in the league who's young and good and gettable right now? It's a good question. So I think they're going to start with trying Brandon Knight, barring a Kimbo trade or something like that. They're going to start with Brandon Knight there to see how it happens. People kind of forget about Brandon Knight because he was out all last year and he was very bad the year before that. But, Knight's only, 26 right now, 27? He's still very young.
Yeah, I think he'll be 27 when the season starts, if my memory's correct.
So I think they're going to give him, barring, like I said, a big trade, they're going to give him a shot at it. If I had to predict it, I don't think he will be the future point guard going forward. As far as is the guy in this draft, maybe if we end up with SGA or we go crazy, get Trae Young, that could be the 5th guy going forward. Guys in the league right now, we've talked about trading 16 for Beverly. He would be more of a stopgap option. Famously, Rozier's been in the trade discussions because the Celtics can't totally afford to have him and some of the other guys on the roster going forward. So maybe that guy could be the guy. There's a lot of options. Just
to jump in quickly, I think the Brooklyn point guards as well could be someone that 16th pick has kind of been floated around. I talked about Jeremy Lin a while back before we even started this pod, I think, and some other smart people have brought up Dinwiddie recently, and I even wonder whether D'Angelo Russell has a future with that team. He had his kind of misdemeanors towards the end of last year as well, so. There's the Russell Booker Towns link, so maybe they'd go for 2 of the 3 to get the 3rd over down the track.
That's the wrong 2. Okay, so let's use this to transition to the number 31 pick a little bit. Do you think there's anyone there that could? I mean, maybe could's a strong. I think there's like a realistic possibility of being the 5th guy.
Yeah, I think there's some interesting names. It's kind of some names that we've touched on. In previous pods with my Booker board and a few other names as well. I know you're high on Melton. His kind of absolute ceiling, I'm sure, would be as a starter in the NBA just because of what he brings defensively. He could be a Marcus Smart type who I think most people would argue is a fringe starter on the right team in the NBA.
I can't believe he might be going 31. That's just insane to me.
Yeah, everywhere I look, it's kind of his range. There's a few places that are happy to put him up top, but there doesn't seem to be much buzz for him. So, you'd be pretty ecstatic if he was there at 31.
There'd be a lot of buzz from me, that's for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And then if the Suns passed, I'm sure it would go the other way and you'd be livid. But yeah, there's some other names, Brunson, Milton, Carter even. Holiday, who we mentioned before, although I highly doubt he's a starter, as Benjamin's question alluded to. But there's a lot of interesting names there.
You left out the most interesting name, David. I'm so disappointed in you.
I left it out on purpose because I think he's your prediction for the 31 pick.
I actually think they're going to do it, David. That's why I'm going to be so disappointed when they don't. I think they're going to take Landry Shamet. He had a workout for the Suns where our buddy Evan Sidery, who is there, he's a Suns reporter, obviously. You all follow him. He said that Landry just killed his workout, made like 80% of his threes. And,
that helps in the lead up to the draft, I think.
Especially given that it reinforces everything you know about him, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I saw a great quote earlier today where I think it was from an NBA scout who said something, and kind of might butcher the quote here a little bit, but something along the lines of the 4 days up leading to the draft are where we fall in love with these prospects, and then the 4 days after the draft and after we've selected them is when we wonder whether they're even NBA players.
I like that. Well, I will say, going to that point about the 4 days when people start to fall in love, I've noticed yesterday, I don't know if you saw this, there were a few, like well-known draft people on Twitter, like Jackson Hoy and people like that, who were saying some nice things about Landry. I think people are starting to fall in love with Landry Shamet. They're starting to join me on this.
I'd be pretty happy if he's there at 31. I kind of had 3 guys listed here. Shamet being one, but one that I knew you were probably gonna put there as your pick at 31. The other one we've touched on quite a bit, and I wouldn't be overly happy with this pick, but in terms of making predictions, I think Holiday makes a lot of sense purely because he's the only guy that's come in twice to work out for the Suns, and I'd be much happier at 31 than I would be at 16. So
yeah, say they make like a Kimba trade and don't include 31, and they end up taking Kimba, and then they get Holiday at 31. I'd be fine with that because I think that makes more sense because he kind of projects as a backup point guard.
Yeah, a bit of a spark plug 6-man type, I think, is kind of his role in the NBA. And then the other one I already mentioned as well, which is Melton. So I'm going to throw 3 names out there, and hopefully I can hit on one of them.
Okay, I like it. I like those predictions. You're a workout heavy guy, and all those guys worked out Holiday twice, so that makes sense.
Yeah, it's probably a good time to mention. I did the numbers on it today with the workouts looking to be officially done. We brought 61 guys in this year to work out for the Suns, but 41 of those I've classed as in the pick 59 range or undrafted guys. There was 4 guys we brought in for the number 1 pick in that infamous week when they threw them all out there in front of the media, starting with Ayton. And then I think there's 16 guys that were kind of for maybe 16 or 31, depending on how the draft goes. So that's a little wrap up of the Phoenix workouts.
Okay, cool. I think we're gonna move on to the number 59 pick because David makes me. I'll let you lead this one.
Okay. Well, as I said, there was 41 guys to choose from here, so it's not exactly shooting fish in a barrel. But I'm going to mention a guy who I've mentioned a few times on our pod and another pod that we did a couple of days ago, and that's Sphere. It's kind of a Hail Mary wishful thinking thing here. So Mika Look from Kansas, 6'8" guy, essentially played shooting guard and just a hell of a shooter. And I'll mention again what I mentioned on the pod the other day, which is, as we've discussed on this pod, very unlikely that the Suns draft 4 guys and they all make the official roster, but look for them to maybe do something like they did last year with Alec Peters and take a guy here that essentially becomes a 2-way player straight away and beats off some of those phone calls that these guys or the undrafted guys are going to get as soon as the draft's over to add to their summer league rosters and things. So I would be probably more ecstatic with a pick like this at 59 than some of the guys at 16 and 31, just because I absolutely love this kid.
Okay, next listener question. This is a little more general draft stuff, I guess. Shea Ali, I think it's Shea Ali. Is that how you pronounce that? At VVB9_2. He asks, Ryan, he's referring to Ryan McDonough, keeps mentioning TJ Warren in the core. Is that a ploy to increase his trade value? And if not, does that worry you? I don't think it's necessarily a ploy to increase his value. I think it's just, it really makes sense for him to do that regardless of how he views TJ's future with the team, because even if he wants to keep him, he wants to keep him happy, right? So he wants to make him feel like he's part of the core, and if he wants to trade him, he wants every team in the league to think he has a lot of value. So I think regardless of how Ryan views TJ, he'll be saying things like that.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. I think he's been pretty heavy on it recently, which you could read into, which I think Shea might be. But I think that was kind of a direct reaction to, I think he left him out quite a few times earlier in the offseason, and I do wonder if that kind of got back to him. Because, yeah, he seems to be making a more direct effort, whether it's to bump up his value or whether it's more just to feed TJ's ego, because I think he left him out a little bit earlier on talking about the Phoenix core. So TJ's a little bit of a touchy guy. I'm not sure if I'm still allowed to swear on our pod, Max, but
go for it.
He famously said "man, fuck you" on Twitter to one of the Suns fans who was actually tweeting concern for him. So
that was Chris Koffel, and Chris Koffel's like the nicest guy on Twitter.
Exactly. So 2 shout outs for Chris this episode. But I think he can be a little touchy. So maybe it's got more to just feeding his ego rather than bumping his trade value up.
Yep, I think that's probably what it is. More that's what I lean if I had to take one side or the other.
Yeah.
You want to go on?
Yeah, I'll go to Brian's question. Brian Adams at Coach B Adams. He said, with the Kawhi news, what are some realistic trades you want the Suns to be part of? Not ones where they get Kawhi, but ones where they can help the deal go through. Would taking on bad contracts for players/picks be worth it? I think it is worth it in certain circumstances. I'll kind of lean on some Mick D comments here where he's, continually said that they'd be in the market for any, young up-and-coming player on a, team-controlled contract. So, you're only looking at a very small bunch of players here. But if we just go to the Lakers rumors, who seems to be the front runner for Kawhi, I'd definitely be happy for the Suns to get involved in a deal like that, where they're maybe taking on Deng for someone like Lonzo Ball. That's the kind of deal that I'd be happy for. But I definitely wouldn't want to see them taking any kind of large risks or really bad contracts on for mediocre assets. I don't think the Suns need to add any more mediocre assets to the treasure test. It would really just be if there's a guy like Lonzo Ball being dangled. What do you think?
Lonzo's definitely the guy that jumps out to me. I know a lot of Suns fans don't like Lonzo Ball, primarily I think because of his father, who is obviously an asshat. I think it's fair to say.
Yeah.
But his on-court fit I think would just be beautiful with Booker. Especially, the shooting is an issue. We'll see how he can do correcting that in the future. But the way he plays defense and the way he passes, I think was just pretty ideal as a backcourt partner. Yeah. All right, let's move on. I think we're going to predict some general NBA trades for draft night. You want to go first?
Yeah, I think, I'll just say we like to keep some, just general NBA things in the pod, not just all Suns. So we're going to see if we can, pick a rabbit out of the hat here as well. I think I'll go with, and I need to tie in John, whose at handle is douchebag John.
I think it's douchebag.
Douchebag John. He's asked if I can say a couple of things in my Australian accent, so I'll tie this in with this trade that I'm going to throw out would definitely make me say crikey. I will go with a Dennis Schroeder trade. So I think Atlanta definitely want to get off Dennis Schroeder, and I could see it happening on draft night. A team that you spoke about earlier in the pod is Charlotte with the 11th pick. It's I think I'm reaching here a little bit, but I think there's some kind of logic to it. I could definitely see Charlotte trading the 11th pick for Schroeder, but taking 19 back as well. So just sliding back in the draft and getting a guy like Schroeder if they're moving on from Kemba Walker. He is only 24. He comes with some negatives, but kind of guy I could see playing on that team and give them a point guard to build their new team around if Walker's going to leave.
I'm sorry, Charlotte fans. I didn't approve that.
Charlotte still get a decent pick as well. They might be, eyeing someone off a little further back in the draft. And Atlanta get to take a new point guard at 11. There's guys like Sexton and SGA there. And I think they're really going to try and bottom out and build this kind of young core, Collins, Prince, whoever they take at 3, and then 11. So, there might be some other pieces there, but it's pretty hard to find a Schroeder, destination. But, one thing I do know is that Atlanta would happily get off him if they could. So, I'm gonna throw that one out there.
Yeah, I think that's a good prediction. I could see that happening for sure. It makes sense for both sides, even though, as I expressed earlier, I am not a Dennis Schroeder fan at all. I could see other teams being a Dennis Schroeder fans.
What have you got?
So mine's not as specific. I just, it really feels to me like something crazy is going to happen in this draft, and my prediction for what that's going to be, I think this Memphis thing is real. Yep. I think they really do want to move back, and for some reason I just see either the Celtics or the Sixers just they have a lot of assets, using some of those to move up, go to number 4, particularly if Doncic is on the board, and just decide, hey, we're going to dominate the league for a decade.
Yeah, I think that's it's a logical prediction and a smart one, and as much as I don't want to see those two teams get even better, one thing that I've kind of thought about in the last couple of weeks as I, essentially come to terms with the fact that Ayton is going to be the Suns' pick is I really want Doncic to go somewhere that he can thrive and succeed and look good. To make us all who had him at number one also look good. And both of those teams would be home run hits for both player and team, I think.
Yeah, there'd be a 100% chance that Luka's good if he goes to one of those teams.
Yeah. Should we move on to some bonus questions?
Yeah, let's do some bonus questions. These didn't really fit into any structure of this draft, so we thought we'd do these at the end. First one, Cody James Hunt at @co_dhunt. He asks, what prospects from previous drafts have been some of your biggest hits and misses? This is a good question. This is a fun one. I'll start with hit. My dad went to Indiana University, so he's a big IU fan, and I kind of watched them for that reason.
Yeah,
I was watching Oladipo, kind of before his junior season where he broke out, and I just didn't understand why he wasn't considered a top-end prospect. I think he was back in first round, early second round sort of range, and I was like, this guy looks like Dwayne Wade to me. I just didn't get it. And then once we got a little closer and his stock did rise and he was a top 5 pick, I thought he should have been number 1 pick in the draft. That was wrong. It should have been Giannis, but I think among the top guys, I think that's been proven right.
Yeah, not bad. It was sketchy there for a little while, but he helped you out this past season.
This past season was great for me, wasn't it?
Exactly.
And that's a good reminder to everybody to not write people off too early, because sometimes people can emerge later.
Fit and situation mean a lot in this league.
It matters so much. That's why Bender's going to be a star with Igor next year, right?
Exactly.
For biggest miss, this isn't going to surprise anybody. A lot of people miss on this guy, but it's got to be Jason Tatum last year. I desperately did not want the Suns to take Jason Tatum because I thought all he could do is sort of score in the mid-range. He's proven that to be woefully wrong, I would say, in his rookie year.
Yeah, I'll double down on that, and I'm sure there's a lot of Suns listeners kind of nodding their head as well. There might be a few that were on the Tatum train, but I think, majority that I saw anyway all kind of believe the same thing, which, we're all proven wrong, definitely.
I think the lesson to take from that, too, is that when you're evaluating these guys, sometimes you need to look at what they can do, what their skill set allows them to do, sometimes more so than what they did in college. But I think some people will say, hey, DeAndre Ayton.
Exactly. And, hopefully, to a certain extent, we're proven wrong on him as well. Not to say that we're, totally hating if he's the pick at 1 for the Suns.
I hope he wins Defensive Player of the Year next year.
Oh, me too. I'll move on to Nair B&B's question, which is at TwistedMetal333. He said, with the Lakers now in position to create a super team, how can the Suns stay competitive in the Pacific Division? The Lakers want to create a super team. They haven't yet, so let's not go too crazy with that talk just yet. But I would actually be all for them going all in like they look like they're going to, because I've been saying for some time I hope the Suns stick to the timeline somewhat. I'm happy for them to start trying to build around Booker a little more and push towards the playoffs. But the long-term game should still be to wait out this Warriors reign. And if the Lakers want to go up against them for the next 2 or 3 years and kind of kill a lot of their future assets in at the same time, then I'm all for that. I think, then a few years down the track, it could be an interesting rivalry with, say, someone like Sacramento. There's obviously the past links with the Chris trade, Bogdan being on their team now. And obviously, if all things remain the same, picks 1 and 2 in this draft and a bit of rivalry between whoever's chosen there. So the Clippers are the other one in the division who God knows where that's going for them. I think we've continually said they're probably the hardest team to work out right now. Maybe we'll know a little bit more after the draft, but I think it's an interesting division going forward and one that's kind of split in two. And I for one hope the Lakers go for it because it might be another kind of ill-fated move by the Lakers that opens things up for Phoenix in 3 or 4 years' time.
I would much rather compete against Sacramento and the Clippers in the future than Golden State and the Lakers now. That's for sure.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm going to move on to Scott Coleman's question. He's at ScottyCo21. He asks, who's the current player on the roster that will get cut or traded that we're not talking about? Sort of a tough question because David and I talk about everyone because we're nerds. But the guy I think that probably most less nerdy Suns fans aren't talking about as much is Alan Williams, our beloved Big Sauce.
Yep.
The way his contract is structured makes him very intriguing for other teams and trades because he's unguaranteed. They can just cut him and save a bunch of money with him. Mm-hmm. He also would be someone who, if we are aggressive in free agency, it would make sense to cut him because it's a free $6 million we can add.
Yep.
And David, you want to get into the moratorium point because I think it's a good point.
Yeah, I think it's just interesting to note that for good reason, his guarantee date is the 6th of July, 2018, which is also the first day that you are legally allowed to sign free agents. So from July 1 to July 5, teams will talk to players, have verbal agreements in place, but then on the 6th you can actually put pen to paper. So I don't think it's any coincidence that that's the date that the Suns have to make a decision on Williams, because they'll know and have a much better idea of whether they want to keep him on the roster on that day.
Yep, that's perfect. What we got next?
We just got a couple more from Josh and Tyler, and the reason we're going to mention these is because we really wanted to include everyone's questions that took the time to submit into us, because we really appreciate it. We appreciate the people that are continually listening to the episodes as we put them out, and it's been thrilling to us to kind of watch it take off. So these questions, I think, as you said, with some of the bonus ones, we couldn't really place anywhere particular in the draft predictions pod for today, but I wanted to touch on them briefly. So Joshua O'Meara 2 is his handle, has asked what the Suns could do without ruining their future to make them compete for the playoffs next year, and also what Knight's stat line is next year. To that, I'd just say, Josh, we have an instant draft pod coming up on Thursday night / Friday morning, depending on when we can get it out. And then our next episode after that is a free agency primer before July 1. So check out those because we'll go a little bit more in depth then once we know how things look after the draft. And, we might be able to also predict Knight's stat line in the future in some player profile pods that we're going to do through the very long off season. So keep a lookout for those. Tyler Martins, who's at the real T Marts, has asked how much variability is there for a prospect to improve their ball handling ability. Obviously, people can improve, but wondering how many players drafted with questions regarding their handle actually improve. Again, what I'm kind of hoping for here, Tyler, is the Suns draft someone with this bit of a question mark around them, because we're really going to dive deep into, and I'm really excited when we've actually got new Suns players to talk about. So check back, because I reckon we'll be touching on both of those questions in the next few episodes.
Yep. One final question. This comes from my little brother. He wants to know, sort of thinking the Doncic Ayton thing, but a little more generally, do European players who often will play a lot in professional leagues at a young age, for example, Doncic played from, he's signed with Real Madrid, I think, when he was 13, and he started playing for them when he was 16.
Yeah. Because
those players have professional coaching and they're in, professional league, they're playing as professional players, are those players more likely to develop earlier on than guys like Ayton or Bagley, who were in AAU with awful coaching? Like Bagley is coached by his dad. And then they get into college where they're only there for a little while. They don't get a ton of instruction. They really haven't maximized maybe like their basketball acumen. So he wants to know, is that something that should be taken into consideration when you're drafting, say, Ayton and Doncic? My answer is yes. I think that does matter to an extent. I think that European players generally are probably a little closer to their skill ceilings. I think athletically, sometimes they actually have more to gain because European teams just focus so little on athleticism and strength training and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I don't think it should be something that should be overrated. I wouldn't be like, oh, Doncic is already at his ceiling. I think that's not the way to look at it. I think Doncic has a lot more to gain skill-wise. Like, think about his shooting.
Yeah.
But I do think it's a factor and it should be considered.
Yeah, I think it's a factor, and I would just point to probably, a lot of people publicly criticizing AAU basketball in the last couple of years, and I think that's one of the major reasons that people have come out and criticized things publicly, because they realize that the system's not really conducive to creating good basketball players early on in the careers of these young guys.
Yeah, the NBA's actually stepped in and intervened a little bit.
Yeah, and I hope that they continue to do so among kind of a few factors in leading up to guys getting drafted.
Yep. Alrighty, should we go on to 7 seconds or less?
Let's go on to 7 seconds or less. I've reached out to a secret listener who I can unveil.
A secret listener?
At the end, but with our mailbag, I thought rather than me create the questions for 7 seconds or less for Max this episode, we've got some questions from somebody else who I'll unveil at the end. But
now I'm nervous, but okay.
So I'll throw them at you, and you know the drill. If the Lakers call and ask for the 16th pick and taking on Luol Deng's contract for Lonzo Ball, do you think about it?
I don't think about it. I do it right away, immediately. No questions asked.
Fair call. Would you entertain trading Dragon Bender, the 16th pick, and 31 to move up 5 spots in the draft? So that would be to the 11th pick with Charlotte, I suppose.
Oh yeah, no, I don't do that. I value Bender more than anybody in that 11 to 15 range, I think. I'm still really high on him.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. I am too. There was a very quick Twitter video from him today too, which raised a few eyebrows.
Did you see the shirt he was wearing?
I did.
Oh man.
Third question, how many rookies do you think the Suns will have on the roster next season, including two-way contracts? And how many do you think they should have?
I think they will have 2, and I think they should have 2.
Good
Not
answer.
Be boring and repetitive, but that's this range that makes sense to me.
All right, and we've got a bonus one here.
Uh-oh.
How many points, rebounds, assists, and field goal attempts did DeAndre Ayton have versus Buffalo?
Points and rebounds. Didn't he have like 15 and 12 or something like that?
Close. 14 and 13.
Okay. I have no idea on the other ones.
He had 1 assist and 13 field goal attempts. So last question, do you know who our secret listener is?
I'm going to guess it's Chris Hansen who's asked about stats.
Ding, 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 ding.
Thanks, Chris. I appreciate your questions. Okay, I think that about does it for today. Thanks, everyone, for listening. If you could please rate, review, and subscribe, it really helps us out. My name is Max. I am at MaxMCC11 on Twitter. He is David. He is at The 4 Point Play on Twitter. Thanks, David.
Thanks, Max. I can't wait for the draft.
Me neither. Until next time, guys.